What's up everyone and welcome back to the World History Channel. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button today. Let's get started. A brief history of public toilets. From the ancients to the present and beyond, there's been at least one time in your life when you've been out at a music festival and thought about whether or not you should miss your favorite band. After all, you'd rather drive home to use the facilities you already know and love than use the shams on the festival grounds. However, when you have to leave, you must take the necessary steps to restore your purity. Keep in mind that it can always be worse. If you don't think so, take a look at this primer on porta potty history and revel in your modern ability to not have to squat over a pit. You would think that people were urinating in the streets, but that is not the case. It turns out that the historical impromptu dump methods were slightly more civilized than you might think. The majority of ancient civilizations had a pit, cistern, or pot that they used whenever they needed to take care of business. There were even very smelly men who cleaned up after you. Put a clothespin on your nose and prepare to look fondly on these nasty-ass toilets of history. Toilets outside Mohenjo-Daro. Mohenjo-Daro was one of the earliest and largest major urban settlements in history. It was built in the 26th century BCE. Therefore, it makes sense that they would have an advanced method for pooping in public at the time. Even though it was only the 3rd millennium, the people who lived there had Western-style toilets made of bricks and wood that were attached to the outside of buildings so that you could stop by and lighten your load, as it were. Mohenjo-Daro was lost to time until it was found again in 1920. Following a particularly fortunate excavation, Sir Mortimer Wheeler, who served as Director General of Archaeology in India from 1944 to 1948, wrote, "The high quality of the sanitary arrangements could well be envied in many parts of the world today." Chamber boilers. Everyone more or less has an idea of what a chamber pot was, but if you've never thought about it, here's the skinny. Variously referred to as chamber pots, chamber pots were used in ancient Greece since the 6th century BC. In essence, chamber pots were personal pieces of cheap, waterproof clay that could be easily carried on a long journey or spent a quiet night in. Additionally, you could dispose of your disposal quickly and effectively after finishing your work. Gongs and the people who sell them. Everyone thinks they know how people in the Middle Ages went to the bathroom just kind of anywhere. But it turns out that we were all using the wrong terminology, and also people have always been very gross. If you were fortunate enough to have a bathroom close to your home, such as in your backyard, or whatever it was called at the time, you basically had a hole that turned into a cistern known as a gong. Their gongs were so popular. There was even a class of worker designated to empty out the gongs called gongmongers, who very likely smelled atrocious by the end of the day. Were these men ever loved? Or did the gongmongers die out, smelly and alone? Certainly, it was not the most pleasantly fragrant of professions. Closed stools. Around the 13th century, people finally started to realize that squatting over a hole or a ceramic pot was an existential nightmare for the germaphobes of the Middle Ages. Thus, humanity's greatest scientists began experimenting with chair-based portable bathrooms. Since people were either constantly on the move, or didn't have the space to dedicate a room to defecation, they came up with a closed stool. The closed stool was basically just a chair or a box, depending on which model you sprung for, that contained a chamber pot on the inside for collecting your leavings. People would use a version of the closed stool until the flushable commode appeared many years in the future. Thunderbox. The person who named the Thunderbox should have been given an award for on-the-nose advertising, or would it be on the bottom? Anyway, the Thunderbox was an update of the closed stool, a chamber pot under stool, but instead of a chair you had to carry around with you, it was a smaller wooden box you lugged around from place to place in case you were going to drop a 19th century BM. It's believed that Thunderboxes either originated in India or were brought to India by British military men, where the box became a hot item among the locals. Sir John Harington's Royal Flush. So, when did people start flushing their waste into the mysterious system of tubes that may or may not infect groundwater? That all came about when the godson of Queen Elizabeth I, Sir John Harington, was banished from court for being sassy and had to fill his time with something. During his exile from 1584-1591, Harington built a house and devised the first flushing lavatory system, which he dubbed Ajax for some weird reason. Ajax had a pan that you sat on, and you evacuated your bowels through the opening at the bottom. To flush the toilet after you were done, you used a system of handles, levers, and weights. The bored all out of all the disgusting lavatory systems, pots, and boxes on this list, the Bordaloo has the fanciest sounding name. Even though it isn't Thunderbox, it sounds like an ABBA song, which is exactly what you want in a portable toilet's name. Booraloos were oblong, rectangular, or oval-shaped portable toilets for women to use while in church where there were no bathrooms. The skirts were released by panniers and held in place by the device, which they simply slipped under their dresses. The device allegedly received its name from Louis Bourdaloue, an incredibly popular priest and orator who was into giving long-winded sermons. Thus, the device was named after the droning cleric. The Elson Chemical Closet. In the 20th century, portable toilets got bigger, even if they didn't get any more hygienic. The Elson Chemical Closet is only sort of what it sounds like, a trash-can-sized box in which to relieve yourself and hope that whatever you've left behind is cleansed by the hellfire of whatever chemicals the Elson Company used. Strangely enough, it looks nothing like a closet. These were originally used in World War II, and afterwards they made their way across to the US where they were sold in army surplus stores. Basically, you popped the lid of the ECC open, squatted on top and let loose. Then you had to carry it around with you to the next campsite. It's not romantic, but it's the best they could do. The wastebasket. Is there anything more American than the outhouse? They're like apple pie and episodes of A Prairie Home Companion rolled into one wooden outdoor toilet. A small shack at the back of your actual house was the only bathroom available to the majority of people who lived in rural areas. You probably didn't have a septic tank to properly dispose of the waste, so you had to be your own gongmonger and clean up after yourself. What a life. According to Teresa Menard, Outhouse and Iowa aficionado, if you lived in rural Iowa or rural anywhere else, that was the only way of life. Jim Crow porta toilets. The world has always been a nightmare, but for African Americans in the early 20th century, it was a long, stressful dream that culminated in their uncertainty regarding which establishment would fundamentally be decent enough to permit them to use the restroom. Many African Americans road tripping through the South at the time decided that it would simply be easier to bring their own toilets with them in the trunks of their cars, rather than run the risk of terrible things happening to them should they decide to stop. These were basically updated versions of Thunderboxes, but some drivers simply opted to use buckets. Dunny cans. If you were living in Australia or New Zealand in the early 20th century and you needed to use the restroom in a suburban area, then you would likely end up doing your business in a dunny can. Instead of a cistern, these were essentially outhouse-like structures atop a large can. Dunnymen, the gongmongers of their time, collected and cleaned the cans whenever they got too full. According to George Seddon, the typical Australian backyard had a dunny against the back fence, so that the pan could be collected from the dunny lane through a trapdoor. Johnny on the spot from the Korean War. After U.S. military men tired of using the Elson chemical closets of World War II, a new portable toilet entered the fray. Johnny on the spot. These are the blue plastic porta potties in the above image that you're familiar with, except 100 times more disgusting. The number of men who needed to use the bathroom vastly outnumbered the actual toilets available during the war. According to John C. McManus, Camp Pennsylvania, one of the largest of the war, only had 7 portable toilets available for its 700 soldiers. After a while, they ended up with 20 toilets, obviously still not great. Of the Johnnies on the spot, specialist John Beck said, such asterisk tours would always fill up to overflow, and the people that would come clean 'em were always late. So sometimes you had to walk a mile to somebody else's porta potties. That was the worst part about it for me. Professor Hinton's personal toilet. Even in the 21st century, there's no way to use a portable bathroom without grossing yourself out just a little bit. Susan Perry Hinton, a pharmacy professor at Xavier University in New Orleans, created a portable toilet seat as a means for allowing yourself to use any bathroom you want while you're on the road. She recalled the moment of inspiration. We were traveling and had to go to a family reunion in Chicago. All the public bathrooms were atrocious. I just got the idea out of my head. Weird phrasing, but sure, Hinton. The seat can be adjusted in a number of different ways to hover about an inch above the actual toilet seat. If you're not in a position to use the seat on an actual toilet, you have the option of attaching a plastic bag to the bottom. Coachella's portable toilets music festivals are disgusting, and not it's just the ticket prices. Seriously, the porta potties in use at most music festivals are probably responsible for at least 2 new strains of a supervirus that will kill us all. So, how do you provide clean and safe bathroom facilities for people while not breaking the bank? In 2015, Coachella decided to do away with the blue closets of death and built temporary buildings to hold over 300 stalls and sinks. After all, it's hard to handle the torrent of rolling festival kids in Native American headdresses. Portable toilets of the future. All of this information about ancient portable toilets is fascinating, but how will we use the bathroom in public in the future? It's fortuitous that you've asked this question because EcoSan is working on that right now. This portable toilet doesn't need water, and it doesn't empty into pits, which makes it perfect for areas where water is scarce, or where there's a high risk for groundwater contamination. Basically, the toilet recycles nutrients from your waste and uses it to make resources for agriculture, which is still kind of gross no matter how great it is for the crops. A brief history of public toilets, from ancient times to today and beyond. Everyone hates using public restrooms, let's face it. They're either too crowded, too smelly, too moist, or too full of history from other people. However, every one of us has experienced that desperate moment at some point. Your stomach makes that sound when your favorite band is about to perform at a music festival. You try to fight it, you really do, but when nature calls, she doesn't leave voicemails. You think to yourself, there has to be a better way, as you look across the field at the row of blue chemical coffins. But take comfort because while today's porta potties may be less than ideal, the history of public toilets is one of the most disgusting and weirdly fascinating stories of human civilization. From ancient clay pots to futuristic space waste disposal, toilets have always been more than just a convenience. They've been a mirror to our culture, our class systems, and our commitment to pretending we're not all just weird, fleshy poop machines. So strap in or drop true if you're multitasking, because we're about to flush through the centuries with a 5,000-word exploration of how we've peed and pooped in public, from ancient times to today and maybe even to the stars. Mohenjo-Daro was initially present, and it was surprisingly clean. Let's kick off our toilet odyssey in the Indus Valley Civilization, around 2600 BCE. If you think your current neighborhood HOA is obsessed with rules, wait until you hear about Mohenjo-Daro, an ancient city in Pakistan. Their urban planning was so advanced they actually had drainage systems, real drainage systems. Brick toilets with built-in vertical chutes that emptied waste outside of buildings in the style of Western toilets were used by the people here. Imagine that. Before Rome even considered aqueducts, something eerily similar to indoor plumbing existed in a civilization more than 4,000 years ago. When Sir Mortimer Wheeler, a 20th-century archaeologist, dug up the ruins, he was so impressed he said modern parts of the world could learn a thing or two from their sanitary designs. So the next time someone says ancient people just pooped in the dirt, correct them. Using fire and historical accuracy. From clay pots to public shame, ancient Greece and the chamber pot revolution. If you ever time traveled to ancient Greece, you'd notice people weren't really that into bathrooms. They were into pots. The chamber pot, a ceramic container carried or stored in your home, was the ancient answer to the modern toilet bowl. Everyone used them, from peasants to philosophers. When nature struck at night or during a philosophical debate, you never know, you'd squat, do your business, and then chuck the contents out a window or into a designated cesspit. Gross. But also weirdly efficient. The Greeks even had a special word for this practice. Apitumpano, which roughly translates to dumping from above. The Roman Empire, where pooping became a public spectacle. But the Romans were something else. Imagine you walk into a large marble room full of holes in stone benches with no dividers. You sit down next to your friend, strike up a casual chat about gladiators, and simultaneously handle your business. That was a Roman latrine. Public. Open. Social. There were even cleaning sticks called tersoriums, sponges attached to sticks, shared communally, and rinsed in a bucket of salt water between uses. That bathroom at the gas station suddenly doesn't sound so bad, does it? Public urination was just as commonplace for Romans as using the bathroom or buying wine. Of course, if you were wealthy, you had private facilities. The rest, on the other hand, used these shared restrooms to form relationships and spread bacteria. There are a lot of bacteria. Medieval times. Welcome to Gong Town. The Middle Ages, when hygiene was taken for granted. The gong was invented during a time when chamber pots were still popular. A gong wasn't an instrument, but rather a cesspit, and if you were lucky or rich, your home had a private one. Unfortunately, gongs needed to be emptied, and that's where the gongmonger came in. This heroic figure was the medieval equivalent of a porta-potty cleaner, tasked with wading through human waste and clearing it out, usually under cover of night to avoid the smell and the shame. Imagine doing that with no gloves, no mask, and no mental health benefits. Gongmongers were feared, avoided, and utterly necessary. And let's be honest, probably the only ones who could clear a room faster than the Black Plague. The thunderbox and the clothesstool. Before portable toilets, as the Renaissance dawned and people started caring again about things like science, art, and maybe not dying from fecal-borne disease, the concept of portable toilets took off. Enter the clothesstool, a padded chair with a hole in the seat and a chamber pot inside. Fancy people used these to poop in comfort, and servants were left to clean them. Later came the thunderbox, a loud, heavy wooden box carried around by colonials and aristocrats alike, especially in British-occupied India. Think of it as the Victorian precursor to the modern RV toilet, except without plumbing, dignity, or silence. Flushing into the future. Sir John Harington and the Ajax toilet. So when did we finally stop hoarding our excrement in boxes and pots? Enter Sir John Harington, godson of Queen Elizabeth I and all-around cheeky fellow. After getting kicked out of court for writing naughty poetry, Harington invented something truly game-changing, the first flushing toilet. He called it the Ajax, a pun on the old word for toilet, Ajax, and it required weights, levers, and a lot of water. Elizabeth even had one installed at Richmond Palace, though the idea didn't catch on broadly until the 18th century. Turns out people preferred their chamber pots and didn't trust this newfangled water-wasting sorcery. Still, Harington laid the groundwork for what we now take for granted every time we flush and walk away like nothing ever happened. Ladies get their own. Sort of the bourdaloue. While men had it relatively easy when nature called, women had to get creative, especially in public. Enter the bourdaloue, a dainty porcelain device designed for women to discreetly relieve themselves during long church sermons. Named after Louis Bourdaloue, a priest notorious for preaching marathon-length homilies, the bourdaloue was essentially a glorified gravy boat for your business. Women would slip it under their skirts and quietly let go, all while maintaining the illusion of perfect 17th century decorum. Its elegance and horror rolled into one ceramic dish. The Elson Chemical Closet. WWI's favorite throne. Skip ahead to the 20th century and the world was at war, and nobody wants to worry about finding a loo when dodging bombs. Enter the Elson Chemical Closet, a portable toilet used by the military that relied on harsh chemicals to dissolve human waste and, hopefully, kill the smell. Soldiers carried these bad boys to remote outposts, training camps, and basically anywhere a trench could turn into a mess. After the war, Elsons were sold as army surplus, and the general public could enjoy the magic of peeing into a can full of acid. Romantic. Not even slightly. Functional. Absolutely. America's primitive relationship with relief during the outhouse era. Meanwhile, the outhouse ruled the land in America's vast rural regions. A small wooden shack with a moon carved into the door, a symbol thought to indicate ladies only, but now just quaint decoration. The outhouse was both a blessing and a curse. On the one hand, it got your waste away from your living quarters. On the other, it was often freezing, spider-infested, and lacked any kind of lighting unless you brought a lantern. Still, for most of rural America, this was how it was done until indoor plumbing finally crawled its way across the country after World War II. If you've ever had to use one in the dead of winter, you know it makes the Elson Chemical Closet look like a spa day. Porta-potties. The blue booths of desperation. Fast forward to the modern era and you've probably met the public toilet we all love to hate. The porta-potty. A plastic, chemical-filled booth that smells like sadness and last night's beer. The modern portable toilet is the result of decades of refinement and engineering. First introduced during World War II and refined during the post-war construction boom, porta potties are made of lightweight plastic, use a no-water chemical process, and are, miraculously, cleaned out by professionals with vacuum hoses. Still, they remain the absolute last resort, even if some companies now offer VIP luxury porta-johns with running water, music, and even air conditioning. Festival goers rejoice. The space toilet. Pooping in zero gravity. And what about the future? Well, if you think pooping on Earth is complicated, try doing it in space. The toilets on the International Space Station are suction-based and rely on airflow to prevent things from floating away. Everything is bagged, tagged, and either burned upon re-entry or stored for research. Yep, that's real. NASA has spent millions of dollars perfecting the space toilet, and future missions to Mars may require even more advanced systems, including composting and urine-to-water recycling tech. Because nothing says bravery like drinking what used to be your pee while flying to another planet. Tomorrow's toilets. The high-tech throne revolution. So what comes next? Smart toilets. Already in Japan and some high-end homes worldwide, we're seeing toilets with heated seats, bidet sprays, automated lids, built-in deodorizers, and even health monitoring tools that can analyze your, samples for signs of illness. There are concepts for self-cleaning public restrooms that sanitize themselves with UV light and motion-activated everything. Some urban planners envision toilets with facial recognition for access, to prevent misuse, while others are exploring ways to turn human waste into energy. Yes, your feces could one day power your toaster. And isn't that just the circle of life?